All right, today we're cracking open the Bible to uncover a story you might have totally missed. We're talking about a huge legal drama, a cosmic courtroom case that stretches all the way from Genesis to Revelation.
And it really all kicks off with this one kind of startling question. What if God sued you?
Now, I know what you're thinking. That sounds like something from a modern TV show, right? But check this out. This idea is straight from the Bible. The prophet Micah wrote, "Hear you mountains, the case of the Lord, for the Lord has a case against his people." And the key thing to get here is that this isn't just, a metaphor. It's being presented like a formal legal summons. And this kind of courtroom language, it's not a one-off thing. Nope, it's actually a recurring pattern, almost like a literary code that scholars have spent decades trying to figure out. So, it all kicked off when biblical scholars, guys like Herman Gunkel, started noticing something weird. They realized that the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Micah, they often sounded less like preachers and a lot more like lawyers who were formally presenting a case in court. And the big question was, why? And that question led to this really fascinating investigation as scholars got to work cracking this lawsuit code.
So they even gave it a name, the rib pattern or covenant lawsuit. Rib, that's a Hebrew word that basically means to contend with someone or bring a legal case. So what we're looking at isn't just some random legal words thrown around. It's a very specific literary structure where God formally charges his people with essentially breach of contract for breaking their covenant agreement.
But that raises another question. Where did this whole structure even come from? And this sparked a huge debate among scholars about its Sitz im Leben. That's a cool German phrase that just means setting in life. Were the prophets just copying the kinds of trials they saw at the city gates? Or was this part of some religious ceremony? Or did it come from somewhere else entirely? Maybe something like international law? Well, it turns out that last idea, international law, is where they hit the jackpot. It led to a breakthrough that gave them an ancient political blueprint for this whole divine drama. Because, as it turns out, the key wasn't hiding in Israel's own courtrooms. Nope, it was found in the high-stakes world of ancient Near Eastern politics. We're talking about the treaties between these massive, powerful kings and the smaller nations they controlled. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. Look at this direct comparison. On the left, you've got the structure of a typical Hittite vassal treaty. It has a preamble, a history of the king's good deeds for his subjects, the rules or stipulations, a list of witnesses, and then the blessings and curses for keeping or breaking the treaty. Now look at the right. The biblical covenant lawsuit follows that exact same structure, almost point for point. It's basically a legal response using the format of the original political agreement. How cool is that? Okay, so that's the theory. But what does this actually look like in the Bible itself? Well, let's dive into the case against Israel as laid out by the prophet Micah. And Micah chapter 6 just illustrates this pattern perfectly. First up, Micah summons witnesses. Hear you mountains. He's literally calling on creation itself to witness the trial. Then God gives that historical prologue, reminding the people of all the good things he's done, like saving them from Egypt. Next come the indictments, the specific charges. Israel has completely forgotten the core rules of justice and mercy. And finally, the verdict and sentence are delivered, pulling directly from the curses that were laid out in the original covenant. It's a complete open and shut case following the pattern to a T. But hold on. Just when you think you've got the story figured out, God is the angry prosecutor, Israel is in the hot seat, the Bible throws this massive curveball, a completely surprising divine verdict. And this forces us to ask a really crucial question. Is God always the one bringing the charges? Is he always the prosecutor? And the answer is a huge no. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. I mean, look at this. When scholars went through and analyzed all the divine lawsuits in the Old Testament, what they found was stunning. In about 80% of the cases, 80%, God isn't the prosecutor, he's the defender. Yeah, you heard that right. Far more often, God takes on the role of a divine defense attorney. He's pleading for his people against their oppressors. He's vindicating the downtrodden, and he's fighting for the innocent. So what this means is that this whole lawsuit idea is primarily a tool for deliverance, not just condemnation. It's a game changer for how we read these texts. This legal framework is so fundamental, you could almost say it's woven right into the Bible's very DNA.
And you can literally trace this legal motif across the entire biblical story. The pattern ticks off right at the beginning, in Genesis chapter 3, with that investigation in the Garden of Eden. That's basically the first trial. It gets formalized into a classic legal text in Deuteronomy 32. The prophets, as we've seen, use it all the time. And it doesn't stop there. It continues all the way to the end, where the book of Revelation frames the final judgment using this very same lawsuit structure. It's everywhere.
So what all this shows us is that the covenant lawsuit isn't just some clever literary trick the prophets used. It's actually a core theological framework for how the Bible understands these huge ideas like justice, divine judgment, and ultimately, grace and reconciliation. Which, of course, leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. If the entire Bible can be read as one long unfolding legal drama, what then is its final verdict on humanity?